everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on volume 7, 8, and 9 of Neon Genesis Evangelion's manga. I've really liked the manga so far. I don't know, I've had some people on YouTube be like, I don't like the manga. I'm like, no. I think what helps me with the manga is kind of going in it with the same mindset as the rebuilds, that it is not the OG series. It is very much a retelling, reimagining of it that is still somewhat rooted in canon, but it's kind of like an alternate universe telling of it, right? I think going into this knowing that it is essentially like a canon fanfic. It's Sadamoto's version of the events, and there are changes. There are things that are focused on differently than Anno focuses on, and I think that helps me to like appreciate it better. I feel like you need to see the OG series in order to appreciate the rebuilds the most, and you need to see the OG series in order to appreciate this the most. So, but volumes 4 through 6 were fantastic. Volumes 1 through 3 are probably my least favorite so far. I'm like, it's pretty good. Volumes 4 through 6, mwah, beautiful. Like all the focus on Kaji, the focus on Toji and Ida and Shinji and their relationship, and Toji dying. It's like, oh my god. And so now it's like, okay, well, where do we go from here? Toji's dead now, and Shinji's clearly going to be mentally affected by that, so what do we do? So there's that to take into consideration. So I'm curious to see what all we get from that. But I do have some comments now that people have seen Thrice Upon a Time and have commented about it and had some comments with this first manga. I do have some comments before we go into this. So Christopher Peterson talks about that there is someone called Gaius Cassius Longinus, which are the 3 spears in Thrice Upon a Time, and they basically were a Roman general. It's like, of course, yeah, just tie that in there. A Roman general or senator that was behind the assassination of Julius Caesar. And I'm like, okay, so having these 3 spears being representative of a Roman senator who is trying to assassinate Julius Caesar. And so I like that Christopher Peterson was like E2 Fuyu-chan. Basically, I thought that was really, really great. So very nice. So Gendo is basically Julius Caesar. Checks out. I like it. GSMD talks about how the Thrice Upon a Time Toji is a fake doctor, which we established in the movie, but it kind of parallels Fuyu-chan, who in the OG series is a fake doctor. And I was like, oh, that's so cool that you get those parallels with those characters, right? That Fuyu-chan was only a doctor because it was called for after the second impact. A lot like Toji. I'm like, I like that parallel. Works really good, especially with his connection with Shinji, Toji's. And I was like, oh, nice. I really liked that. We'll talk about the suit ripping. I'm going to wait for that. And then Melania the Severed and Nicholas also talked about that. We'll save that for the very end. Alex Cornejo had a few comments on here, but talked about how Megumi, who is not Ogata, but a different Megumi who voices Rei, also voices Yui, the Eva, and Pin. I was like, what? Because I was saying in one of the previous volumes, I was like, man, it must be a spoiler when you find out that Yui and Rei have the same voice actress, because it kind of would hint that Rei is a clone of Yui. But Alex Cornejo was like, well, technically she also voices Pin and voices the Eva, so that's not necessarily a spoiler. They may have just thought she was voicing multiple characters. And I'm like, oh, crazy. I did not know she was also the voice of Pin, which now I'm just picturing Pin talking like in Rei dialogue, and it's really funny. So that's really cool. I liked that. And Christopher Peterson also noted how Kaworu and Mari are kind of like, I wrote down manic pixie dream folks because they kind of are, right? They kind of are. Kaworu is very much like a manic pixie dream boy. He comes in being like, we're going to make Shinji's life happy whether he likes it or not, right? The theme of every Hallmark movie. And Mari is kind of the same way. So I guess in the end, if you want to ship Mari and Shinji, it's kind of along the same lines of shipping Kaworu and Shinji. They're both manic pixie dream people. My thing is, I feel like Kaworu and Shinji have had way more content together than Mari and Shinji. So for me, my bias towards shipping kind of leans a little bit more towards Kaworu. But again, if y'all want to ship Shinji and Mari, y'all go right ahead. They're both people that are much older than Shinji, that have known their parents. We'll do with that what we will. But also Christopher Peterson noted that, correction, Ramiel is not a pyramid. They are an octahedron. I was like, oh, much sexier. Much sexier of a shape than a pyramid. Octahedron does have a bit more of a sexy femme fatale sound to it than pyramid does. So, God. Ramiel, for just so you all know, Ramiel has made it into the waifu poll. Possibly. I think we have to narrow it down, but I really want Ramiel to be on the waifu bracket for the waifu and husbando brackets for March Madness. I just want Ramiel to be there because by that point when I do the husbando and waifu brackets, I'll be done with Neon Genesis. I'll need an excuse to go back and rewatch. And that'll be a great one. Also, there was a big discussion between Alex Cornejo and Christopher Peterson about Mari and her role in the whole series. And Christopher Peterson was like, Mari's kind of like the Switzerland of Neon Genesis, right? They're kind of a neutral option. And these are Christopher Peterson's words, not my own. So if you're from Switzerland, I've never been there. I can't speak from experience. But Christopher Peterson said, Switzerland, not the most exciting place, but nice nonetheless. And then Alex Cornejo was like, actually I pictured Shinji as more of a seashore and moonlight kind of guy, but the Alps do have nice mountains. I was like, again, I love it. I absolutely love it. My whole thing with Mari and Shinji, just to kind of wrap up the whole thing with them since we're moving on into the manga, is, again, if you want to ship Mari and Shinji, go right ahead. My thing is, they're kind of like just a crack ship to me because they don't really have a lot of moments together and they just kind of get... My thing is, a lot of people have argued that Mari, in the comment section for Thrice Upon a Time, they're like, well, Mari's kind of this alternate option, the Switzerland, if you will, to kind of like keep the shippers, saying like, no, Shinji's moving on to something new. He's not going with Rei, he's not going with Asuka. This is a whole new option. And my thing is, I almost wish that Anno never showed us Mari at all until that final scene on the train station. If that was the goal Anno was having of her character, to be this neutral option, I wish he would have taken it to the extreme and just had her come out of nowhere in the final scene, grab his hand and run off with him, and it'd be like, oh, here's this person we didn't expect to ship Shinji with, but I guess we're shipping her with him. I really would have liked that better. I think it would have drove home the whole point of her being a neutral option that has no connection to Shinji. In the movie, as it is, she does have a connection to Shinji. She introduced his parents to each other, so she has a very big connection to Shinji. So that whole argument of, oh, she's a neutral option, that doesn't really hold a lot of weight because she isn't. She has weight and she has connections to Shinji. She's known him her whole life. So it's like, she was there when he was born. That's creepy. So yeah, I can't go with that logic. I'm like, no, if they really wanted to go with that argument, they should have just had her come in. I would have been fine if she came in at like the last train scene, popped out of nowhere and was like, come on, Shinji, and he flirts with her and they go. I'd been like, okay, cool. That's how we're ending it. Fine. But as it is, I'm like, that argument doesn't hold weight for me. So whatever. If y'all want to ship them, go right ahead. But anyway, Largo01 says that there was a 9 to 10 minute extended trailer that was released before Thrice Upon a Time, and the sequence shows that the, what does it say here? It shows, that there is a red car making an illegal U-turn in the scene at the very end of the movie, and that could be Masato. So basically saying there was a 9 to 10 minute extended sequence released before the movie, which I wish they would release that. That'd be fun to see. But also that the idea that Masato actually lives in the very end. I'm like, I like that idea. I like the idea of all the characters that died being back at the very end. I mean, with the exception Gendo and Yui kind of go off together and have happily ever after in the afterlife. I like the idea that Masato comes back, possibly, and that her and Kaji and Kaworu are like gardening together. I really honestly would love to see Kaworu like hanging out with Masato and Kaji, gardening with them, and Kaji Jr. That'd be great. I'd be all about that. Could we have a crack ship of Kaworu and Kaji Jr.? Well, weird. That is a crack ship. For sure. For sure. And then Alexander Q talks about how, because at the very beginning of Thrice Upon a Time, we see them walking through the ruins of Tokyo 3 where it is all contaminated and corrupted. And the reason why they can do that without the hazmat suits, because Shinji was in a hazmat suit in 3.333 when he was with Kaworu looking at the destruction of Tokyo 3, was because of the curse of the Eva. And honestly, and this kind of relates back to GSMD, Nicholas and Melania the Severed, and several comments about that damn plug suit. People are just defending Asuka in that damn plug suit. This is the last time I'm going to talk about it. I don't even think I'll bring it up in the recap because I'm just so over it. But here's my thing. A lot of people have said that the plug suit it's ripped because it's a symbolic representation of her aging out of the curse of the Eva and becoming an adult. Okay. I'm gonna rant for a hot second, and I'm gonna try. I'm recording this after my holiday break, so I've had some time to cool off. I was really pissed off about this during the Thrice Upon a Time comments. I was just like, y'all can probably tell, but I've cooled down since then. But here's my thing. Here's my thing. One, I hate the Curse of the Eva element. It's probably my least favorite part about Neon Genesis. It's the most fanfic of all the elements of Neon Genesis plot-wise, and it just feels like the weakest writing. It's like, we needed an excuse for this. Here's this weak writing. It's below Anno. It's below the standard I hold Anno to, and that's why I don't like it, because I'm like, I could have come up with that. If I was just being lazy and needed a plot convenience, I'm like, yeah, Curse of the Eva. It's not been there the whole time, but we'll bring it in this last 2 movies. It just doesn't, it feels beneath Anno to me, as somebody that's seen his stuff. It doesn't feel up to snuff with the writing I'm used to him, so I don't like it. And I don't think it's well explained. I think it's just a plot convenience. They're like, I need to write myself out of a corner. Here's this. And so there's that. So that's my whole thing with Curse of the Eva. I don't like it. Not about it. The thing with the plug suit too, we were talking about this in the Discord. The plug suits expand. They're big, massive chunks of plug suit, and you click the button and they formed a suit. But they are stretchy. Episode 7 of the OG series had Asuka like expanding to the size of a whale in it. It didn't rip, so there was no rips to it. So when people are like, oh, it's expanding, I was like, no, theoretically, the fabric doesn't do that. It has stretch, right? And here's my thing above it all. When people are trying to defend it as, it's not just gratuitous fan service. There's a reason behind it. I'm like, bullshit. I'm going to call bullshit on you so hard. Because no, there's not a reason to it. You can wrap it up with as much symbolic BS as you want to, but the fact of the matter is, they wanted to sell merchandise for it. That's what it is. Because there's figurines, and I'll show y'all pictures because I went on a search when I was pissed off. No, look at these, look at this, look at this. There's these figurines of Asuka Langley on the beach, and then there's Rei Ayanami with the long hair version. You'll notice that when Rei Ayanami grows her hair out, does her suit have rips in it? No. When Shinji breaks his Curse of the Eva, does his suit have rips in it? No. I just, so it's been, but Asuka's are just so conveniently placed in these wonderful areas across her breasts and around her crotch and her ass so that, it's damn fan service. And that's all it really is. It's just so somebody can whack off to it. And it's annoying. And I hate it. As a female viewer, what gets me the most, and I'll show you images from the actual movie, why did she have to be in that position? What it does is take like a badass character and put her in this submissive position. Asuka Langley is not submissive. She's a dominating mofo badass. But in this one moment, you've put her in this submissive position and been like, oh, she's growing out of the Curse of the Eva. No, it's just fan service. That's all it is. And when I go and look up fan art, all the fan art that I find are people drawing Asuka in these submissive photos, and it's disgusting. Because as a female, I know what people do with that and the ramifications of that. Culturally, societally, personally, it's not good. I hate it. So I honestly, if I'm being totally honest with everybody, the moment I see somebody trying to defend the plug suit the last 2 weeks, I've just ignored that comment. I just moved on with my life. And that's probably what I'm going to do from here on. So I'm probably not going to mention it in the recap because I've moved on. I've said my piece. I'm done with it. But it's my least favorite aspect of this entire series. Bar none. I was like, when people try to defend it, I'm like, no, you're just defending an excuse to fap over it. That's pretty much it. I feel better. Rant over. It's ironic that I end this rant about Asuka, and the cover of this series of volumes is Asuka. But she's not in a ripped suit. She's not in I guess the position's kind of, kind of neutral. It's not asserting dominance or submission. But, her body is horrifically proportioned. None of these people, do they have organs? But yeah, I find it ironic that that's the volume again. But that's my spiel about the plug suit. I'm done. I'm over it. If you try to argue with me in the comments about it, I will ignore every word you say. So just don't race your wrists on the carpal tunnel trying to convince me otherwise. Hashtag Taurus life, hashtag stubborn as hell. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that rant was, I usually don't rant on this channel, but man, that just struck a chord with me when people were defending it. I was like, no, can't. I cannot. So nope. But anyway, those are my comments. Leading into this volume. That's all I got. So yeah, I am excited though. At this point, we're halfway through, right? We're halfway through almost. I mean, volume 7 will be the halfway point. But I feel like we're so much further than we normally would be. I feel like we're so much further in the series than we would be at the halfway point because we're already touching base on like episode 18 stuff. So unless we backtrack and cover some ground that we lost, I'm going to be curious to see what all we get going into these last volumes. I feel like we're going to touch on End of Evangelion. I feel like they're going to put End of Evangelion in like volumes 13 and 14 because it's its own little volume thing. It's only a 2-volume chunk there. So that's curious. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very, very curious to see what we do with that. So we'll see, right? We'll see. So yeah, in any case, I've wasted enough time. I wasted like 16 minutes. Let's go ahead and we'll start looking at volumes 7, 8, and 9. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Holy cow. I think I like this manga more and more the more we get into it. I think I like it more and more. I'm all about this because I very much like the OG series itself. When you have a medium like a manga or a television series, you are able to expand things in a much broader, spread out context. And I think that lends me to liking it much better because I'm a character driven person. So seeing the characters like fleshed out and seeing more with them, I really appreciate it. Nothing against the rebuilds. I think at this point, and again, I still have 4, 5 volumes left of the manga to get through. I might change my mind. At this point, though, the manga's right up there with the OG series for me. The rebuilds are kind of like I like the rebuilds a lot, don't get me wrong, but they're kind of my third favorite medium at this point. It's like right now it's OG series manga rebuilds. I like the manga an awful lot, and I like Sadamoto's interpretation of it, and I like what Sadamoto is doing with the character work and how it's been consistent. Like Sadamoto's vision has been consistent. And I could see why there are decisions made in this manga that I could see people that are fans of Neon Genesis not liking. I could see that. I hear you. But personally, I like the choices that have been made so far. I think they work really well. Man, the artwork in this volume, I don't care what anybody thinks about the manga. The artwork is stunning. Like the artwork, there are so many frames in this that I'm like, I'm going to use that as a wallpaper. That's amazing. I'm going to have that on my background so much. And knowing now that these kids were Kaji, the kids that were shown in that one shot that I'm taking pictures of were Kaji and his brother. I'm assuming his brother was the kid with the skateboard. And then the other kids that were there that were orphans from the second impact. I kind of like that there's enough of them that you have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You could have had them be like the bodies that were the pilots of the other EVA unit series. If you want to get all morbid and grim with it, you could have done that. But I like what's done. Man, these chapters went by really, I felt like I spent a lot of time reacting, but they went by fast and furious. What I like about this is the idea that Shinji, because the one thing with the manga versus the original series I love an awful lot because it plays with this idea. The original series is much more abstract and much more leaving you to debate what things mean and to kind of talk about Shinji's psychological state throughout all of this. I do appreciate the OG series in that it leaves a lot of things up to audience interpretation. And I think that makes for some really cool debates. I feel like the manga is a little bit more streamlined in its meaning and its message. There are actions that you can explain through the manga quite easily. I like that though, because I feel like Shinji's character in this is really cool. I like Shinji's character being a little bit more sassy. And I like him when he lashes out in this series with the manga. I feel it is much more understandable, whereas it kind of comes out like in bursts in the OG series, which is good. It's apples and oranges. Again, if you told me that you prefer the OG series for being more abstract and psychologically debatable, I totally am with you. It's like an apple over here. And then you have the manga that's like the orange. And it's like, no, things are much more streamlined and explained. But there is a part of me that likes that because it makes sense. And I'm like, okay, cool. It's all, the dots are connecting. And there's still that angle of mystery about it. But I feel like as a reader, I feel like I understand the story much better. And maybe that's because I've watched the OG series. And so things are connecting better because I'm reading it through Sadamoto's mind. And I'm assuming Sadamoto has talked to Anno about certain things. So you have that, right? But yeah, I do feel like Shinji's actions after Toji dies are much more understandable. And I feel like it is much more rational why he freaks out so much. Because that is the one thing in the OG series, in the actual anime, a lot of people question why Shinji gets so like, it's like, well, Toji's not dead. He's just injured. So yeah, it makes sense why you're mad. But I mean, hey, Toji's alive. So why not focus on that, right? And I feel like in this, his anger and frustration and him leaving NERV, it makes much more sense because yeah, it's not just Toji being dead. It's the fact he has to go now and stand in front of Hikari and Ida and be like, I'm responsible for Toji dying. There's a added weight to that. Whereas in the anime, it may not make as much sense because you're like, yeah, it's your fault that he's injured, but he's going to get better. So it's going to be all right. You know, it gives a lot more stakes to it and a lot more weight. And I know we talked in the comments that the producer of the anime had this like no child death clause and was like, we're not killing kids. And that's probably why they let Toji live. He's just incapacitated for the rest of the series. Makes sense, right? But I feel like him actually dying in the manga adds so much more weight to Shinji and his psychological state, and it makes much more sense that you can kind of get on board with his rationale in the manga a lot more because there's that added part to that here that's not in the anime. And like him imagining Hikari and going through being like, it's my fault, and him having to own up to that. And then Kaji coming in and telling his backstory. I honestly like in the manga that Sadamoto makes Kaji a much more role model figure to Shinji. Like we've talked about it in the anime when it was going on, that Kaji's really the one positive adult male influence in his life. Fuji-chan doesn't really have much to do with him, and his dad is Gendo. And so it's neat to see Kaji kind of relate to Shinji. And here he really relates to him because he knows exactly what Shinji's going through. And he's like, yeah, you know, a life for a life. It's one of those situations. But honestly, Shinji going at Gendo and like lashing out and throwing a fist, hell yeah. Like Shinji, I like this. It wouldn't work in the anime. Shinji is so psychologically detached in the anime. And they've built this. What I like about this is that it's consistent. In the anime, a scene like Shinji lunging at Gendo would make no sense because there'd be no pretense for it. But here with the manga, we've built up from volume 1 that this is a very different Shinji, that he is more vocal, he is more open about his emotions, and he is more like sassy and calling things out. And we've established that Gendo in this, the fear that Gendo has of Shinji that gets established actually in the rebuilds, makes more sense here because it's talked about here. So Gendo like flinching and drawing back from Shinji, like going to punch him. It works. It works. I like it. I like it a lot. And then Shinji saying, I never want to see your face again and leaving makes sense too. And Kaji's like, I've got to go pick up the pieces of this and be a dad for this guy. What? Although, much like in the anime series, it does lead to the question, like that scene where Kaji's like looking at berserker mode Shinji whenever Yui's Eva goes crazy, whenever he's like, yeah, it's finally free. I'm like, is this what you wanted all the time? I thought you were looking out for Shinji, but you wanted him to get in the Eva and for it to go crazy? What? So there is still that one moment where I'm like, Kaji's actions seem to be a little bit sinister there, but it's not nearly like it is in the anime, right? And again, Shinji choosing to leave has more impact because he tells Masato, he's like, when he tells her that line in the manga, he's like, all your dreams and wishes for peace on Earth? So how many people have to die to save humanity? What's the number? Like that sass. I'm like, oh my God. it's so good. Like that moment where he leaves has such weight to it, and it doesn't seem so much like an anime. In the anime, it almost comes across, I could see somebody watching it and feeling like Shinji's kind of childish in that moment. But here it's like, no, people have died, like are actually dead and not coming back, and it's on Shinji's hands. So yeah, makes more sense. And I like how the manga handles this, with Kaji coming up and finding Shinji and dragging him away. Because in the animation, he just kind of wanders around, and he eventually like wanders into Kaji's garden by random happenstance. And it's just like, oh. But here, what I like about it is that Kaji actually was trying to find Shinji. Kaji was actually looking for him. It wasn't Shinji just randomly stumbling across him. Kaji's like, oh, hey, I need to take you to this shelter. Come on, let's go. I like that. I like that it's not, again, the anime, Shinji wandering around, it relates back to the Dilemma of the Hedgehog episode. It relates back to episode 4 of the original series, back to episode 1. There's a visual parallel to that. Shinji's psychological state then versus now. In the anime, it works. Because, again, that Shinji that's been established since episode 1, it's consistent with it. Here, with what we've been given with Kaji and Shinji, this makes a lot of sense too. And I like it. I like that it narratively is a tighter, it's a more concrete narrative structure, whereas Anno is a much more loose and abstract structure. So again, you pick your preference, whichever you like more. But man, the cross-examination where Gendo realizes that Yui is rejecting him and he's frustrated by it, and Kaji leads Shinji to the bunker and explains that he's like, no, he's like, when we survive, we exchange lives for lives. You know, because Shinji, sounds very, I don't know if self-righteous is the right word, but he sounds like kind of holier than thou when he tells Masato, he's like, what's the price of peace and all this, and it sounds very, it sounds like fancy lip service, right? And Kaji kind of calls him out on it, like, no, peace is not free, freedom's not free, and survival is not without sacrifice. And he's like, yeah, no. He's like, for us to live, someone else often has to die. That's just the way it works. And he's like, I wanted to live, so I gave up my brother and my friends to do it. And now I have to live with that decision. And I love seeing that shot of Kaji when he's Shinji's age, and then cutting back to Shinji and him being like, no, I sold my friends and my brother out. And now I have to live with that decision every single day. And what do I do with that? And you could definitely, there's no way that this could have been done in the anime. No way this backstory could have been done. If you had a no child death clause, could not have animated this. No, would have been grisly. But yeah, he's like, no, this is what I had to do. And he's like, I lived to tell the story because of my brother's death. And I like the chapter on atonement. We have like Asuka over here trying to do what she can to fight off this angel, while Kaji's like, look, I traded my brother and my friend's life for my own. And then he talks about meeting Masato. And it's so sweet. He's like, Shinji started out this backstory wanting Kaji to like be like, he's like, when did you become a spy or whatever? And he's like, yeah, you could kind of say that led me on that path, right? But the animation, I love the drawing of him, and like, it's Sadamoto, again, Sadamoto knows how to do romance, right? He knows how to do romance. And he's like, that image of like Kaji and Masato together, my heart. But he's like, yeah, I still love Masato and she loves me, but it almost feels like we don't deserve to be happy. He's like, can we really? He's like, her father died to save her. My brother and my friends had to die to save me. He's like, do we deserve to be happy against that? And he's like, you don't deserve to be happy either. And it's like, and that seems so cold in the moment and cruel. And you could argue it's like, that doesn't make any sense. But what Kaji's getting at is he's like, no, he's like, it's not that we don't deserve to be happy and we should be miserable, but like what he's saying is we have to own up to our sins. And so do you. He's like, and Kaji calls him out. He's like, you could have switched. You could have defeated the angel and saved Suzuhara. You could have. You didn't try. He's like, I like that in the anime, in the anime, it's never really brought up in the way that Kaji brings it up in the manga. It's stated very, black and white, like, well, you made a decision and now here's the result of it. But it's never really expanded upon in the way that it is here. Kaji saying here, he's like, no, he's like, you could have tried to defeat the angel and save Suzuhara, but you didn't. You didn't try, you did nothing. So in doing nothing, you did do something. In doing nothing, you caused the dummy plugs to have to be used, and now he's dead. You survived, he died. We traded a life for a life. He's like, that's just the black and white way of putting it. And so he's like, and so it's not that he's telling Shinji that he can never be happy again, but he's saying, how are you going to live? How can you live your life as if nothing happened when clearly something has happened? That's what he's saying. He's like, yeah, you may end up being happy, but don't think that you deserve a great life and think that nothing has, been of consequence of you living. He's like, no, you traded a life for life. So I like that. I like that his explanation for there with that. We want Shinji to be happy, right? We want Masato and Kaji to be happy, right? But it's not that simple. And I like it. And I like that Kaji explains the whole thing about the Evangelion and about the third impact. And he gives Shinji a better understanding in that moment. And in the anime, that part is a little bit rushed. A little bit, you could argue. And here, Kaji sits down and explains to him. He's like, no, this is how this point connects to this point, and this point connects to this point. I like it. I think it works rather well. And then it all leads up to... And the thing I love, too, is that Kaji's story to Shinji of, like, you need to own up to your actions and take responsibility for them. I like that lecture that he has with Shinji leads Shinji back to the O1 unit. And then meanwhile, we have Gendo being like, why is this dummy plug rejecting me? And that whole thing with Gendo seeing all the monitors turning on, like as he's like, why is the Evangelion rejecting me? Why is Rei rejecting me? That shot of Gendo with all the screens of Shinji is so good. I love that. I love it so much. And then we connect it straight to Shinji showing up. Like what Yui wants is him showing up like that. Oh my gosh, it's great. And then I love how Sadamoto draws Gendo. Just draws him so human in that moment. And Shinji's, decision to get back in the EVA makes more sense after Kaji's pep talk. Mm-hmm. But then, yeah, everything pretty much goes back to exactly how it ends the awakening, how episode, I guess it's episode 21 is to 22, right? And Gendo getting splatted by the blood. Again, we talked about in the reaction, his expression seems more genuinely like, oh crap. But then the one thing about it is that when the EVA does go berserk and Shinji does like connect with Yui and becomes the primordial soup and everything and eats the EVA and all this, the one thing that is kind of like so bizarre with all of this is that Kaji, who seems to almost lament, Shinji getting in the EVA but saying it's part of his job, Kaji's just over there being like, well, Seal's not gonna sit still and quiet for this, are they? And it's like, dude, what? It almost seems like Kaji's personality changes. And then Gendo does a complete 180. Like, Gendo went from being freaked out and questioning what Yui wanted to being like, oh yes, all according to Cake, right? That is the one tonal shift that's kind of, it's still weird in the manga like it is with the anime, but what can we do? It's part of the story, so Sadamoto can't really get away from that, right? I'm so glad they included the shot of the EVA with its big eyes and its teeth. I'm so glad they showed us that. It's probably it's so creepy, but it's one of my favorite images out of this whole series is the shot of the EVA with the eyeball. It's one of my favorite scenes. And the panel with Masato next to it, it looks so creepy. I love it. It's a great shot. It's very creepy visuals, very neat. I like it. And then, of course, so here's the big thing. I did not think we were getting Kaworu this soon. Because basically, this volume ends, this 7 through 9. Volume 9 ends essentially halfway through or towards the end of episode 23. Right? So this kind of covers the events of episodes. This covers the events of episodes 20 through 23 is what this set of volumes covers, is episodes 20 through 23. is what's happening here, with some extra stuff with Kaji and Shinji and some stuff rearranged, right? With some of that. So that's interesting. But Kaworu gets introduced basically towards the end of episode 20 instead of 24. So, and he's very, very similar to Rei. He's in the test tube. They call him Tabri, which is his angel name. They call him that. He gets introduced in a very similar fashion as Rei. He's basically brought up to be, I like that Rei in this says that she's like, oh, we're not the same. We're similar, but we are not the same. And I'm like, I love it. Both ties to Adam and Lilith, and also ties to the fact that Rei's like, no, we are not autonomous. We are our own individuals. But yeah, so then we get Shinji, and he's in the primordial soup. We got an interview here that I want to go to. We got some different stuff. The Secrets of Evangelion 9 is the Geofront. The Geofront, a neologism developed to refer to deep underground construction developments. The term Geofront was also used in the manga Ghost in the Shell and the first Pat Labor anime movie. The Geofront, where Nerve headquarters is located, is directly below the city of Tokyo 3 and is a massive dome-shaped vault 6 kilometers wide and 900 meters high. Lit by sunlight reflected down from the surface by a system of mirror-faced skyscrapers, vehicles and personnel enter and leave the Geofront via trains that spiral up and down the curved walls. Many of Tokyo 3's above-ground skyscraper blocks are designed to be retracted below the surface and lock into position from the root of the Geofront dome. While this was designed to remove them from the possibility of damage in case of an attack on a city, the system has proved only partially effective against the Angels. The Nerve HQ building rests on the floor below the dome, surrounded by a terraced and forested landscape. Nerve HQ has a mirror architecture, as unusual as the rest of the Geofront. It has the shape of a pyramid, which appears half buried at ground level, excepting the southeastern face, which descends down the side of a trench in the shape of an inverted pyramid. Nerve HQ possesses a sealed environment system. Sub-basements of the building extend for at least 1 kilometer below the surface of the Geofront. It's such an elaborate and crazy construct, and we were talking about this, like just the way that you get in and out of it. It's so complicated and interesting. Like the Geofront is such an iconic landscape for anime and like just sci-fi, and it's so cool and complex. I like it. We have a little segment on LCL. An acronym for Link Connect Liquid, the amber fluid which fills the cylindrical entry plugs in which the EVA pilots sit while piloting. As the name implies, LCL is a transmission medium designed to convey the thought impressions of the pilot to the EVA unit, allowing pilot and unit to sync and thus operate. LCL also provides oxygen to the lungs of the pilot. It is a liquid that can be breathed, suggesting it may be a descendant of the 20th century U.S. Navy research into such breathable liquids to replace gaseous oxygen for deep sea divers. Interesting. As liquid cannot be compressed, as gas can, such a medium provides protection from high pressure environments. This implies that LCL may also serve to protect EVA pilots from physical shock in combat. LCL may have additional properties which remain classified. Ah, cute. I like it. They're like, we're going to give you some secrets, but like not everything yet. Nice. Again, I like Rei in that coat starting volume 8 up. I like that. Where she's like got her pretty pea coat. And then, yeah, that whole thing with Kaji and Masato, it almost doesn't even look like Sadamoto's work. It looks so different. But these two, like, what an OTP, right? Kaji and Masato. The kiss. What I like that's interesting about this is, I mean, not only that Yui is represented in the EVA form as this just monstrosity. I like that Yui in this manga she's not reflected as this pure being. At times she is. At times she's this pure mom. Like when it's her and Gendo on the island with baby Shinji nursing from her, and she tells Shinji that he can go back. He doesn't have to stay with her. She kind of fluctuates between this weird balance between where she's like a mother figure and she's like, Shinji, go back towards the light. You're not ready to stay here with us yet. Like that. And then she gets like clingy and creepy possessive. So it's like Yui, I like that she's not this saintly martyr character, that she's got like some kind of darkness to her, which is kind of cool, right? And then Shinji just dreaming of killing his dad. Again, we go through the psychosexual stages of development. Here we are, right? And then Kaji trying to like tell Asuka that it's okay to be worried about Shinji. And then him going up to Masato and hugging her and kissing her on their 8th anniversary after bringing her McDonald's. I like she just chucks the hamburger at him. It's great. One thing that Sadamoto does in this, oddly enough, is he is the sexual content, I've said this in the last set of volumes, but the sexual content with Sadamoto is handled very classy. Like there's been some shots where Kaji tells the story of Shinji and him getting with Masato, and it's like them like nude having sex, and it's very classy and done well. And here, like instead of them making love and like transferring the pill that way, it's him giving her a kiss at work. Which again, very risky, but I like that Sadamoto handles it a little bit different. It feels natural in this manga, especially between the two of them. But yeah, meanwhile, you have Shinji and him meeting naked Yui. And again, Yui is just kind of like, she's, talking about not parting with Shinji and like hugging him and embracing him and saying that he can just stay there forever. It's a little creepy. A wee bit. And she like the way that she wraps her arms around him, it feels like tendrils, like something wrapping, like a vine wrapping around him. And then you cut to Rei, who looks like Yui, and Gendo putting the hand next to her and her being like, no. I'm glad that Rei like smacks the hand away, like, get away from me, creep. No, I like it. I like it a lot. But yeah, and so then all these people start invading Shinji's, like, they start invading Shinji's inner thought process. You have Masato invading while Yui's like over there with the, again, that seems very reminiscent of End of Evangelion, right? Very reminiscent of that. And then all these other people start getting next to him, and then he tells them that he doesn't want to leave. He wants to stay there with Yui. And then we get basically the events going into episode 21. Again, I like the idea that Yui wants to keep him there, but then Rei is the one to bring him back. I like that. I like that Rei brings him back to reality, being like, that's not your mom. That's just a version of her. It's not the full thing anymore. And so we see the spirit leave the Evangelion. And what I like is this part is a little bit abstract. We think that it's Yui, right? We think that it's Yui leaving the Evangelion. But the way that its hair and stuff is, it's like, is it Yui? Is it long-haired Rei? Is it Masato? Is it Asuka? We don't know. That part's kind of left to the imagination. I assume that it's Rei or Masato, but I don't know. We don't know for sure, right? And then the double spreads that Sadamoto gives, where it's the tree and it's Shinji seeing like them up against, and of course Gendo being ever the optimist is like, this place is hell, and she's like, no, and she gives a spiel about heaven can be wherever it is as long as you have the will to live. And she looks so much like Rei there, and she's like, a place of all beginnings. She's like, I'll watch over you, and I'll go wherever you go, and I'll still be watching you. And then he leaves to go back with Masato. And I like the idea that Masato and Rei brought him back. And then Kaji over there looking at the nerve card being like, it's the color of blood. And I like the symbolism of Kaji smoking his last cigarette before he's about to go rescue Fuyu-chan. It's funny, Kaji kidnaps Fuyu-chan and takes him to Seal to be interrogated, but then he rescues him. So it's like, that part's still always a mystery to me. I'm like, why? But why'd you rescue him after you kidnapped him in the first place? And then Shinji and Rei have their moment together. Poor Fuyu-chan is interrogated, and we get the flashback with Gendo, just like it is in the anime. Fun times. And then, yeah, Fuyu-chan, his adoration towards Yui. I love that he just calls Yui out, and he's like, why do you like him? And she's like, because I understand him even when people say that they don't. It ties back to the whole thing. She accepted him for who he is and made him better, and then she died. Yeah. So yeah, I do like that there's still that questioning of did Gendo, everyone around them thought that Gendo used Yui to like work his way up in nerve, and maybe he did, but I do feel like the one thing about the rebuilds that's nice is that they do establish that Gendo did love her. Like that was above all else, he did love her, and he was changed once she was gone, right? And we get all the preview with the Evas and everything. Again, I love the shot of Gendo with his arm on the desk and The cross behind him. It's great. It's a great visual. The birth of Nerve. And yeah, we don't see Baby Ray in this. We don't see it, but we see Masato regretting saying that she wanted to be with Kaji, that she was okay with Kaji in the darkness. I like that. And so we establish that Ray, she remembers the time that Shinji has held her hand, like the different times. The one time was when he lifted her up in episode 1. The other time was when he had her pinned against the ground when he went to visit her in the apartment. The third time was when he held her hand to help her in episode 7. And she's like, I want to hold your hand again. And then they do. And I like the relationship this manga develops with Ray and Shinji. Like it is a close relationship, right? But I like that Ray in this manga differentiates herself from Yui. She's like, I may have been created from Yui, but I am not Yui. There is a difference there. So the thing of it is that Kaji comes to say, we get Akagi's mom dying. We get a brief mention of that, although Baby Ray is not associated. And then Kaji comes to save Fuyu-chan. But then we have Gendo. They come and say the man who brought him in has gone missing. We have Fuyu-chan in his custody, and Gendo, he goes to find Kaji. So basically we can establish that Gendo killed Kaji in the end. Gendo killed Kaji at the end, but we don't know who shot Kaji first. Oh, unless it was Gendo that shot him. Okay. Because if you go back to that, he's like, oh, finally, almost too late. Try to aim better this time. So I guess he had a silencer, so I guess he did shoot Kaji both times and kill him. In any case, he's the one that killed Kaji. Was Gendo. And then I like the last thing that Kaji sees is his brother and the others. I'm sad it wasn't Masato, but then he left Masato the voice. He left Masato the voicemail, so he probably he squared up all the things with Masato and felt like there wasn't any unfinished business with them. And again, the manga does a really good job of transitioning from Masato learning about the voicemail to Asuka learning about the voicemail to Shinji suspecting that Kaji's dead but doesn't want to say anything about it. And he makes reference that he knew the line of work Kaji was in would lead to that. I like that. I like there's not that beating around the bush. They all kind of know what's up, right? And that leads to her getting the pill from Kaji. And then we have the backstory with Ritsuko and her and Ray. And I'm assuming that Ray, the injection she's giving her is to keep her alive, is to keep her from becoming primordial soup. But then, damn, Ritsuko just strangling Ray with the tourniquet. Oh my God. Saying that it was like her mom. I feel like the manga can get away with that moment because we did not see her mom strangle Baby Ray, and so her doing it here and then her saying, I did exactly what she did. It's like a little callback. Now, whether or not we get to see that, I don't know. But at the time, right now, we don't. Okay. And so then we have Asuka talking to her stepmom, which we'll talk about her in a little bit. And then we have, this big part here, Evangelion and the New Testament. Maybe it's like biblical references? We'll see. Okay. There is no agreement. One among the many usual aspects of Gainax's Neon Genesis Evangelion is its assigning of dual and differing meanings to the same element, one in Japanese and one in English. This is seen in the TV anime series where each episode has a separate title in each language, in the name of the series itself, and in the name given to Nerve's adversaries. It would seem unlikely that these differences reflect errors in translation, as during the production of Evangelion, Gainax had on its staff a highly competent translator and interpreter, Michael House, who is credited in Eva's production and is known to have checked certain references on behalf of the studio. Rather, the director of Evangelion, Hideaki Anno, has been understood to state that the differences are deliberate and in part are meant to signify the concept of dual meaning within the same term or object. Of course, he's like, there was a meaning, it's dual. I was like, Anno. And Gainax's Japanese title of the series is Shin Seiki Evangelion, written in Japanese as and then it lists the kanji. Gainax's English title is Neon Genesis Evangelion. However, these titles differ in meaning in the second word. Seki means century. The word the Japanese use to translate the Western word Genesis is the related but different Soseki, written as. Note that Seki is spelled with different characters and can also mean animation, spirit, or vitality, suggesting the passionate nature of the series itself. Neon Genesis Evangelion is itself an English language romanization, that is a spelling out in our alphabet of something from a language using a different way of writing. So Shinseki Evangelion is a romanization of the Greek words for new, Genesis, and gospel. The portion of the Bible that was written by the Jewish authors, the Old Testament, begins with the book of Genesis. That portion written by the Christian authors, the New Testament, begins with the Gospels. Neon Genesis Evangelion thus suggests a theme or premise of bearing a new vision of these scriptures. Oh, so that kind of ties to Gendo wanting to write a new scripture of his own. Okay. The opening song of Evangelion, Zankoku no Tenshi no Tima, in fact means the cruel angel's theme. Here, using the word the Japanese use to translate the English word angel, pronounced tenshi. However, Evangelion does not use tenshi to refer to the angels attacking Nerve throughout the story, but calls them by the word shito, written as such, which means apostle, in the sense of one of the early followers of Christianity who spread its teachings from the Greek apostolos, one who is sent out. Oh, the idea of referring to the same entities by one Japanese word with a certain meaning and another English word with a different meaning is established at the very beginning, where Gainax's Japanese title for the episode is Shito Shirai, meaning apostles approach. Approach in this sense of something ominous and destructive coming on. The English title of the episode is Angel Attack. Cool. Okay, cool. I like that. I like that a lot. I like the idea of, again, of course, with Anno and Neon Genesis, it has a double meaning. Of course it does. That's interesting. The fact that Nerve is fighting angels might seem surprising, inasmuch as the organization sees itself as following what it interprets as the divine order of creation. Their motto, from Robert Browning's Pipa Passes, is God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. An interesting phrasing, as it suggests a separation of God from the world, leaving its affairs to the will of men, as proper. The motto is in the sigil of Nerve, which is in the form of an organization's name, emerging from the fig leaf half cut away. In Genesis 3:6-7, after they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the very first thing Adam and Eve do is cover their nakedness with fig leaves. Of course, okay. Much has, of course, been said of Evangelion's use of the Dead Sea Scrolls as a motif. A priceless collection of ancient religious texts dating from 250 BC to 135 AD, the scrolls, first discovered in 1947, are known to contain, in addition to apocryphal and pseudo-epigraphical writings, books accepted as Holy Scripture by some Judeo-Christian groups, but not others, every book in the Old Testament of the Bible except for Esther. However, it should be noted here that there are at least 4 specific quotes from the Old and New Testament used for Evangelion, not within the TV anime series, but in A, the linear notebooklets for the CD soundtracks Neon Genesis Evangelion 1, 2, and 3, which represent some of the earliest official documentations for EVA, being actually issued 1995 to 1996 during the original on-air run of the TV series, and B, the book Neon Genesis Evangelion photo file Ode to Adam, Soldier at the 2015 AD, which details the angels and male characters of the story, published by Kadokawa in 1996. The quotes in Neon Genesis Evangelion 1 and 2 both make reference to the Garden of Eden and its 2 divine trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, from which humankind ate, and the tree of life. NGI 1's quote is from Genesis 2:8-9. And the Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground the Lord God made to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. NG2's quote is from Genesis 3:10-12. Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you not to eat? The man said, the woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me fruit of the tree, and I ate. It is perhaps of interest that the 3 top scientists involved with the development of Nerve and its technology are all women. Dr. Ritsuko Akagi, her mother Naoko Akagi, and Yui Ikari. all three of whom had knowledge of Nerve's director, Gendo Akari. Oh, nice. Okay. Interesting. Gendo's second in command, Professor Kozo Futsuki, stated in Volume 8 of the series that it was commonly believed that Gendo approached Yui Akari for marriage because of her knowledge and connections to SEAL, the secret society wishing to put into use the occult knowledge it alone possessed from the Dead Sea Scrolls. When Gendo, who was born Gendo Rokubungi, married Yui Akari, he took her family name and became Gendo Akari, a practice that sometimes occurs in Japan when a family without heirs gives a daughter in marriage, the son-in-law now becoming the heir. Seal entrusted Gendo Akari with the execution of their plan for reconciliation with the divine, funding first Garen and its later successor, Organization Nerve, both under Gendo's administration. Neon Genesis Evangelion 3's quote is also from Genesis. "Come now, let us make covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me." Genesis 31:44. The covenant to which it refers is not the most famous one in the book between God and Abraham, regarded by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike as their spiritual ancestor and the beginning of man's attempt to reconnect with God through religion. It instead refers to a covenant made between Abraham's grandson, Jacob, with Laban, Jacob's maternal uncle, to affirm Jacob's right to marry Laban's daughters, and for Laban not to harm him in the future. Jacob, a name which means deceiver or usurper, has waited 14 years for the right, during which time he had borne children by the daughters and had furthermore managed to make off with Laban's wealth. Laban even accused Jacob of having stolen the sacred idols he worshipped. It was in fact Laban's daughter Rachel who had stolen them and brought them to Jacob's tent. In Paul Johnson's well-regarded 1987 work, A History of the Jews, he comments on Jacob's character: a dissimulator, a Machiavellian, a strategist rather than a fighter, a politician, an operator, as well as a dreamer and visionary. It was Jacob who had the dream for which the film Jacob's Ladder was named. Genesis 28:12, and he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up upon the earth, and at the top it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. It was also this same Jacob who, in what Johnson calls perhaps the most mysterious and obscure passage in the entire Bible, fights hand-to-hand with an angel, or God himself, in Genesis 32:24-32, and wins. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaketh." And he said, "I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." And he said unto him, "What is thy name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For a prince hast thou power with God and men, hast prevailed." This is the first time the word Israel appears in the Bible. Johnson notes the term Israel may mean he who fights God, and he who fights for God, him who God fights, he whom God rules, the upright one of God, or God is upright. There is no agreement, nor has anyone yet provided a satisfactory account of what the incident means. Oh, I like it. I like it. Interesting. The idea of Jacob fighting the angel of God. Evangelion and the New Testament. The consequences of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil suggest that the fundamental conflict between human beings and angels, and even the prospect of a fight between them. It is noted that God did not forbid Adam and Eve to eat of the tree of life, only the tree of knowledge. But after they ate of the tree, the Lord God said, "Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also the tree of life, and eat and live forever." So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims, the word is actually of uncertain derivation, but is understood to refer to angelic beings, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the trees of life. Genesis 3:22-24. It has been pointed out in Evangelion, neither the angels nor the humans opposing them in Nerve seem to understand each other's nature, behavior, or composition very well. Their early clashes suggest this, and both factions make efforts to examine one another. In this interpretation, the misunderstanding comes from the fact that each one has but not with the other divine aspect. The angels' immortality, the tree of life, the humans' mortality, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In seeking to a complete divine nature, then Nerve finds itself literally in hand-to-hand conflict with the angels who guard the tree of life. The rivalry for divine nature may therefore suggest a rivalry over which faction bears the correct message, whether the angels referred to as Shido are in fact the true apostles or men. This brings us to the fourth scriptural quote used for Evangelion from the book from the book Neon Genesis Evangelion Photofile Ode to Adam Soldier of the 2015 AD, and the only one of the 4 to be from the New Testament. Consider in this viewpoint of the Apostle Paul, the author of most of the books in the New Testament, and the most important preacher of early Christianity. In Galatians 1:8, Paul enjoins of the church, "But though we, or an angel from heaven, preach any other gospel to you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed." In Corinthians 6:2-3, Paul asserts the great power that will be given to believers. "Do ye not know that the saints, i.e. humans of true faith, shall judge the world, and the world shall be judged by you, and ye are unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things than that pertain to this life?" In Colossians 2:18, Paul furthermore warns true believers not to be fooled into worshiping angels. The New Testament quote that appears on the back cover of Neon Genesis Evangelion Photofile Ode to Adam Soldier of the 2015 AD is Acts 5:38-39. It is spoken by Gamaliel, a leader amongst the Pharisee religious establishment, who warned that the apostles should not be killed as blasphemers for their actions, because if the counsel or this work be of men, it will come to be naught, but if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God. Acts 5:38-39. Interestingly, whereas the Old Testament quotes in Neon Genesis 1-3 are all from the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, Adam, Soldier at the 2015 AD's actual wording is from today's English version, also known as the Good News Bible. If what they have planned and done is of human origin, it will disappear. But if it is from God, you cannot possibly defeat them. You could find yourself fighting against God, suggesting that the staff associated with Evangelion had access to at least 2 different English versions of the Bible. That's a lot. That's a lot, but I like that. I like the delving into like the Christian aspects that they bring into the story and kind of incorporate those into the plot and kind of the more thematic things about it. I like it. But yeah, so then we have this very gorgeous. This shot of Kaworu going into volume 9 is one of my favorite covers. I like he has the white Converse, but he's holding a black cat, which I'm sorry, but I was not expecting Kaworu to full on break that kitten's neck. Oh my God. So yeah, let's talk about volume 9. I do like that for all of Asuka and Kaworu's like rivalry, it is established in this manga. Like they do actually meet and have words. But I like this cover where she's like says, "I love piano" or "love piano." And she's in front of this like dingy, messed up piano. And then we see him in front of like the nice black one. I do like the manga goes into the psychological aspects of Asuka and her mom, their relationship. I like that we talk about it, that we're not just being quiet about it. It actually has a purpose. I like it. But but us bringing Kaworu into this story, like Kaworu comes in episode 24 of the anime, and he comes in fairly sooner in the rebuilds, like in the background. But he kind of comes in around the same time as episode 24 would be if the rebuilds had it exactly like that. But here Kaworu comes in like during episodes 22 and 23 instead of 24. So it's interesting how they portray Kaworu in this, right? Again, Shinji is not wanting to go see Kensuke and Hikari face to face because he doesn't think he can look at them. And when we finally see Hikari, she's kind of like, I don't want Shinji to be here because she's like, it won't be the same as it was before. Because she kind of knows what's happened with Toji. Ida's in denial about it, but Hikari is like, no, we can't treat things like they weren't happening as before, right? He's like, it's not right. And so, yeah, again, I can't get over the fact that like every version of this has Kaworu in front of that damn piano. I love it. And there's like the cross in the floor, like, and then the stained glass, like, oh my gosh, all the symbolism. But I will say this. What I like is that this seems to go more back towards the episode 24. I'm glad I read the drafts again, because this kind of goes back towards the drafts where Kaworu, it's interesting because you have the draft version where Kaworu either one rejects Shinji and says we're not together, we're not liking each other like that, or seems more human, right? Much more human. And then you have in the actual anime, which again, episode 24 is maybe my favorite episode of the series. 24, 25, and 26 are probably my top 3 episodes of the series. If I'm being honest, I'll have to probably think about that for the recap when I rank the episodes, but I love episode 24 so much. But I get a lot of the criticism where Kaworu, they're like, he comes in like a manic pixie dream boy and sweeps Shinji off his feet. And Shinji, who in that version is so starved for affection, he's just like, I'll cling to anything. I get the criticism of it. Here, Sadamoto kind of takes that criticism away because this version of Shinji is not clinging for affection. He seems like a very normal teenage boy who's just struggling with all the BS around him. And he's trying to make sense of it all. And here, Kaworu is not like trying to be like swoon worthy to Shinji. He's not like, hey, Shinji, wink, wink, we're on a first name basis right off the bat. No, they're not like that at all in this. And instead, Kaworu is very much like Rei, where he kind of is inhuman. He doesn't understand how human emotions work. And I like that. I like that Kaworu's very alien in this. He doesn't exactly know what to do. He doesn't understand personal space. He's playing Ode to Joy right off the bat. But I like that Shinji is apprehensive. Shinji's like, wait, what are we doing? Who are you? What's going on? And Kaworu's just like, oh, well, do you know this song? And like all of this. And Kaworu, okay, if you've not watched Heaven Official's Blessing, this will make no sense. But if you have, Kaworu's kind of like Hwa Chong in this moment where he looks down at the cat and he's like, oh, you're trying to like do something with my love interest? Like, no. But the thing of it is, Kaworu he looks at something very in terms of black and white in this scene. He sees this kitty and Shinji does say, Shinji says, stop following me. I can't take care of you. And Kaworu goes, oh, well then I'll solve the problem. Don't worry. I'll just kill this kitten because you said you couldn't take care of it, so now I've solved the problem. And Shinji's like, now wait a minute. And it's such an interesting moment because going back and looking at this while I was freaking out during the actual anime, during the actual reaction, Kaworu's like, what? You said you couldn't take care of it. It was going to starve to death. I just snapped its neck. Now it's gone. Problem solved. And Shinji's like, well, how could you do that? And he's like, the cat would have died. He's like, if that's all that there is, then what I just did was kinder. And Shinji's like, you kind of seem like Rei, but I kind of don't like it. So I like the idea that Kaworu kind of presents himself not as this like swoon-worthy like cherub from above, but he comes in as kind of like this alien presence, and Shinji has to warm up to him. And right now, as of right now in the series, Shinji has not warmed up to him. He's just kind of like, what's wrong with you? And I kind of like that. I like that it's something that's not, they develop this relationship, and Shinji kind of at first is like, I don't want you around. And he's like, well, why not? And Kaworu, he's not being clingy and having like no sense of personal space because he's like trying to like come on to Shinji. He literally doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how humans work. I like that. I like that it gives Kaworu more of a explanation. And then when he shows up with Asuka, he's just like, oh, I heard you talking, so I just want to come in. She's like, you're being a pervert. And he's like, I don't know what that means. It's kind of like Rei. He's learning about humans. And I like that. What a bathroom encounter. Shinji just coming in and being like, what is happening? I love the bathroom encounter where Kaworu's like, I don't get why this is a problem. I feel bad for Asuka, though. Not only is our girl on her period, but she's had a really, really bad day. And they're talking about replacing her. Mm-hmm. I also like how Masato is so wary of Kaworu. She's like, I don't know how to feel about this. But yeah, they were going to have Kaworu just suit up and get in the Eva and go fight the angel right off the bat. And I like that it kind of makes sense where Kaworu, he tells the angel, he's like, sorry, this is part of the plan. I've got to kill you. It's interesting, but the angel ends up attacking Rei instead by the end of it. But yeah, so going through this, getting there, I like the idea of the shower scene too, where Shinji's like, again, this is very different. I'm wondering, if we actually get to the events of if we get to the events of episode 24, if I'm waiting for the turn, right? Because I'm assuming that Shinji does end up feeling bad for Kaworu dying. But right now, what I like is that Shinji's kind of at odds with Kaworu because he doesn't know what to do with him, right? And again, Shinji is not starved for affection in this version, so he's just trying to figure out what's up with Kaworu and what his deal is, which is interesting. But yeah, the rebuild version of Asuka is probably my least favorite because they completely get rid of the mother subplot. And I kind of hate that because that's a big tie to Asuka's character, it's such a good parallel to Shinji and his mom and their relationship. It connects to like her feelings of wanting to be seen as reliable and worthy and of value. And then, okay, this girl. So we get established here. I wanted to go with this. That one girl looks like Mari. That one woman looks like Mari, right? Okay. That one woman looks like Mari. No big deal. It's fine. But then her daughter, and the daughter kind of has the same eyes, sort of like Asuka. We get the idea that the mom could not have kids. So she went to a sperm bank and they made Asuka in a test tube. She couldn't have kids herself and carry them. So Asuka was like her test tube baby. But then we get the idea that the dad went off and got with this woman who's the stepmom, and they actually had a kid. So, okay. So basically Asuka's mom was married to this guy. They couldn't have kids. He left her, had a kid with this other. So technically Asuka and this girl are not biologically related at all. That's just the guy that was married to her mom went off and had her. So if this little girl ends up being Mari, which I'm thinking is the case, they're not blood related. They're just connected by family, which is fascinating. But yeah, but then Rei and them, they managed to take the Spear of Longinus. I like the idea that Kaworu tells Seal, he's like, look, I couldn't stop them. It would have been awkward. But yeah, they did take the Lance of Longinus. He's like, I couldn't do anything about it. And Shinji, again, I like that Kaworu like constantly is like poking and prodding at Shinji, being like, you can't go in the Eva to fight the angel. You'll end up just like Asuka. And Shinji's like, well, we're going to do something. I like that Shinji's kind of questioning everything about Kaworu. I like it. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes to in the next couple volumes. Because as of right now, Asuka is just completely like off the table. Also want to make note, really glad in this version that instead of Shinji masturbating to the image of Asuka in the hospital, instead he punches the chair. I like he punches the chair that looks like the Shinji chair he's in episode 25 and 26 and he punches it because he couldn't do anything. I like that. I like that much better. But then yeah, Kaworu showing up, being the fifth child. And I like that Seal just talks to him, being like, this is what you need to do. And Kaworu's like, these humans are strange. He's like, they're curious for the state of things outside of themselves. They get mad and flustered and angry and frantic for the sake of others. They brood and they worry over them. He's like, it's fascinating. And then Seal's like, yes, humans are like that. And that's why this plan is going to free us from that state. So again, gives the instrumentality a nice preview for it, a nice explanation for it. I like it. But yeah. And then we basically get Kaworu and Rei meeting. And Rei says that they are similar but not the same. Even though they have like the exact same face and hair. It's great. And then yeah, Kaworu actually goes into fighting the situation. But before that, he gets in the shower scene with Shinji. And I like these, like, I just found this little piece of soap. What's the deal? And I like the idea that Kaworu, like, gets up in his space, but Kaworu doesn't understand what the deal is, right? He doesn't understand what Shinji's deal is. He's like, why don't you like us being close like this? And he's like, don't people get close whenever they like each other? And he's like, well, yeah, but he's like, don't you like me? And Shinji says, no. He's like, I don't think I could ever like you. It's going to be interesting to see how that changes, if it does, in the next 3 volumes. But right now, Shinji's like, no. He's like, how does his brain work? He's been exploiting me since we first met. I like that Shinji in this, you can't say in this version that Shinji is blissfully unaware of Kaworu's action. Shinji understands that Kaworu is like getting all up in his space and like getting onto him, and you can definitely tell Shinji's aware of it, but Shinji's like, he's like, I don't like you, like we're not friends, like what are you doing? So I'm curious if Rei getting attacked by this angel is going to impact that in any way, because I feel like it's going to, right? I wonder if Rei getting attacked by this angel and potentially blowing herself up like she did in the anime, if that's going to allow Kaworu to kind of like come in to comfort Shinji, and that's where their relationship kind of blossoms from. I guess we'll find out, right? But I also like in this too that Rei and Shinji, they're kind of like at this point where there's this visual representation of how they're not touching anymore. Like there's a gap that's developed between them. Like there's a wall there that's separating. The AT field is separating the two of them. And they held hands before, but now there's this awkwardness that Shinji doesn't know how to overcome at the moment. And again, the idea of the last chapter, returning fire, with that, where they both go up against the angel. And I like that Kaworu has like damn chainsaw arms. He's got Chainsaw Man stuff where he has like a weapon to fight the angel. It's cool. And then again, the plan is against you. Interesting. But then it attacks Rei, and we don't know what to do about it. And Kaworu figures out that this type of angel is the kind that like encroaches and tries to like be a parasite and get you from within. Interesting. All right, so we got a couple more things here at the very end of Volume 9, and it ends with Rei being attacked by it, like midway through episode 23. Okay. The United Nations, an international organization of sovereign states established in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War in 1945, with its headquarters in New York City. Originally composed of the victorious Allied powers, the chartered purpose of the UN was to promote world peace, security, and cooperation in the post-war world. The organization had come to include nearly all countries by the end of the century. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls took place against the background of the UN partition of Israel and Palestine as separate entities, and it was a member of the United Nations Truce Supervision Organization, Captain Philippe Lippens, who brought in Roland Deveux, director of the École Biblique, a French Catholic theological school in Arab East Jerusalem, to oversee research on the scrolls. He remained director of the project until his death in 1971. It was Deveux, who has discovered the fragments of the Book of Enoch in 1952. The Antarctic Treaty of 1959. It's funny how all these things connect, right, in this series, and it all ties back to this historically. Interesting. Which suspended the claims of any individual nation to that continent, opening it up to extensive research, was written to further the purposes and principles embodied in the Charter of the United Nations. It was the United Nations that investigated and published the official explanation of the second impact in 2002, claiming it resulted from a meteor strike. And then we're tying into the story. The UN gained, in the aftermath of the catastrophe, a heretofore unseen level of power and influence that made it, for the first time, an agency capable, if it deemed so necessary, of action independent of the major surviving world governments. Of those governments, that of Japan appears to be the most susceptible to UN influence, although the mistrust and rivalry between the two organizations is also evident. The headquarters of the 21st century UN is now, in fact, Japan's own capital of Tokyo 2, formerly Matsumoto City. Nice! I like that we tie in like the historical with the story to make it all weave in together. Nice. 15, the Marduk Agency. Like NERV itself, the even more obscure Marduk Agency is supposedly an organization established by the United Nations Secret Instrumentality of Man Committee under its chairman Lorenz Kiel. The founding date of the Marduk Agency is unknown. The purpose of Marduk is to find and identify those 14-year-old children able to synchronize with and hence pilot the Evangelion units. At this point in events, 4 have been found, in order: the first, Rei Ayanami; the second, Asuka Langley Soryu; the third, Shinji Ikari; and the fourth, Toji Suzuhara. Records indicate that the Marduk Agency is a vast concern, with connections to a family of 108 international enterprises. However, NERV's Ryoji Kaji, acting as a double agent for the Japanese Ministry of the Interior, maintains that he has evidence that Marduk is nothing but a vast series of blinds, and the truth about the selection process lies not within Marduk, but with the school all the children attend. Marduk was the ruler of the gods worshipped by ancient Babylon, the city-state whose armies in 586 BC destroyed the original Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem and then exiled the Jews from their homeland during the 48-year Babylonian captivity. The otherwise obscure detail may connect to the Instrumentality of Man Committee. The Dead Sea Scrolls consulted by the committee for their prophecies are believed by many scholars to have been written by the Essene community of Jews, a community which is thought to have its origins during the Babylonian captivity. Interesting! And then we have Systema Sephiroticum. Sounds like Sephiroth, right? Inscribed on the ceiling and floor in a different form of Commander Akari's office are diagrams of creation as conceived by the ancient Judaic mystical tradition known as Kabbalah. It is important to note that because of the antiquity and basic primacy of Judaism and Jewish writings within the Western and also Islamic theological tradition, historically, many non-Jews have attempted to adapt or co-opt such to their own systems of belief or practice. While this has been often done without malign intent, it is often taken on an expression that could be characterized as anti-Semitic. This occurred notoriously with chief editor of the Dead Sea Scrolls research project himself, Harvard Divinity School's Dr. John Sturgnall, who was dismissed from his position after voicing supersessionist views about Judaism in November 9th, 1990. Interview with the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. Supersessionism is when believers in newer religions based on Judaism, for example, religions such as Christianity, founded in 27 AD, and Islam, founded 610 AD, both of which regard God, with whom the Jewish patriarch Abraham made a covenant in 1850 BC, as also being their God, express the idea that their new religion supersedes, completes, or corrects an original Judaism that is now irrelevant. Another extreme example of the co-opting of Jewish revelation is just to justify a movement or program are the views of present-day sects such as Christian Identity Movement, who seek to write Jews out of their own history, claiming that the white Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, and kindred people were the actual people of Abraham's covenant and that the modern Jews are somehow imposters. This millennia-old interest in Jewish concepts and thought has included conventional religious practices as well as esoteric ritual, and has included not only figures regarded as mystics, but philosophers such as the psychologist C.J. Jung. However, one of the earliest non-Jews known to seek occult knowledge from the Kabbalah was the mysterious Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher, 1602 to 1680. He drew the particular diagrammic interpretation of the Kabbalah that appears on the ceiling of Gendo's office, and gave it the Latin name Systema Sephiroticum, the system of the Sephira. Kircher drew controversial and syncretic associations between Christian teaching and the Kabbalah, which had by this time already existed separately for centuries as a Jewish discipline. It is, of course, also important to bear in mind that the long history of Judaism has included within its own adherents a full range of interpretations of Kabbalah, no less than a debate over everyday questions of morals, ethics, practices, and beliefs, which differences that continue to this present day. However, the pattern does not accurately describe the fundamental Judaism Kabbalistic beliefs, to wit, what the 10 Sephiroth, the word, which is original Hebrew, is an ancestor of the English cipher. Shown in the diagrams are attributes of God linked together by the complex pattern that serves as a model, map, schematic, and code for the totality of creation. Therefore, though its study, all knowledge of creation of God can eventually be revealed and understood by human beings. For this to happen in Kabbalah is in fact the purpose of existence itself, as Kabbalists believe that creation, where one made many, occurred because God wished to behold God, and therefore face must behold face. Only when our knowledge of creation, including its experiences and possibilities as brought by free will, is complete, will all existence be reunited with God. Fascinating! So, that ties together a lot of things with the instrumentality, with that all about it. Look at that. Look at that all connecting. Isn't that something? And that's the volume. Cool! All right. Well, I really liked this volume set too. I liked this just as much as volume 4 through 6. I don't know if I like this more than volume 4 through 6 or if I like it just as much. That's curious. I I don't know which I like more. I like them both rather equally. So there's parts of 4 through 6, obviously with Toji and Ida and Shinji that I really like, and Kaji and Masato, but then all the stuff with Kaworu getting involved, all the stuff with Shinji like taking a stand against Gendo, the backstory reveals. I'd say I'm on equal footing at this point of which I like better. Volumes 1 through 3 are my least favorite, but this whole set's been pretty consistent from here on in. So we ended with the events of episode 23. We're not through all the events of episode 23, so I'm going to be very curious to see if Rei ends up blowing herself up like she does in episode 23, or what we end up doing with that, how Sadamoto handles the events of episodes. I'm assuming the next set of volumes is going to be with episodes 23 and 24. Maybe into 25. I don't know. Because, yeah, we tied in like 3 or 4 episodes in this set of volumes. Maybe this series will end with not getting into end of Evangelion territory. Maybe it will end with the series. I don't know. We spent a lot of time on this volume doing extra things that I didn't anticipate us doing. So that's a very curious thought. So I guess we'll see. But in any case, I'm really excited to know your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers. But I'm going to be very curious going into the next volume set what we get. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with volumes 10, 11, and 12 of Neon Genesis Evangelion.